Hello and welcome to the 21st episode of the Adamola Bookman podcast. My name's Alistair Bond and I'm here with my friend John Coughlin. Hi Johnny, how you doing?
I'm good, Al. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, bruv. And this week we are doing With Clough, the Peter Taylor autobiography.
Yeah, so this is kind of part two, if you want, because we did Clough last time around. And these two are forever entangled in the eyes of history. But this book came first for the Clough one. And significantly, it came during Taylor's lifetime, whereas the Clough one came after Taylor had passed away. I had a question for you, Al. Have you read, Provided You Don't Kiss Me by Duncan Hamilton?
No, I haven't. He was the journalist for the Nottingham Evening Post, was he, during that period?
Oh, look at you. Yeah. So, yeah, Provided You Don't Kiss Me, 20 years with Brian Clough. Hamilton was, as you said, a journalist with the Nottingham Evening Post, kind of the inside journalist for Forest for like 20 years. And he had, just total access to Clough and to Taylor. So he would see them every day at the City Ground. And it's a remarkable book. And the reason... The thing I wanted to read the Taylor book was understand his his perspective of their falling out. But a bit of a fly in the ointment there, Al, wasn't there?
Yes, Johnny, I thought we were going to get an insight into that as well. But in fact, the book was written in 1982 before there's any falling out. In fact, the only mention of the falling out is in the foreword written by Peter Taylor's daughter, Wendy Dickinson. And even she smooths it over. She says she talks to Brian's sons, Nigel, and his other son. And, I was like, let's not talk about that. Let's just concentrate on the good times. That was just so silly. So, Johnny, you've learned some revelations here.
Well, yeah, the reason I bring up the Provided You Don't Kiss Me, which, by the way, is really, really good fun, is that according to Hamilton, it was actually Taylor's book that was the very thing that set in train the entire falling out. So everything else that we know about the signing of Taylor going to Derby, him subsequently signing players like Archie Gemmill, John Robertson from Forest, that is all subsequent, but it's actually the original rift. The first cut is this particular book. It's Taylor's book.
So you posit potentially without this book, he never goes to Derby, Gemmill never gets signed, and this whole rift never ever occurs.
Yeah, more or less. Now, it does seem that Hamilton describes the relationship as like a marriage, ultimately. And he goes through the phases of the relationship like a marriage that has failed. There's the initial courting period where they're madly in love with each other, where Taylor is kind of the senior member of the partnership, if you want. And then over time, Clough earns more money as a player than Taylor, and he very early enough becomes the kind of senior member of the partnership and then earns more money as a manager. And obviously Taylor is often referred to as his assistant, never the other way around. It's never called Taylor and Clough, it's always Clough and Taylor.
Okay then, Johnny. So having read this book, and you've just enlightened me here, I had no idea that this book contributed to the falling out. I read this book and I didn't really see anything I considered to be criticism of Brian Clough. So what was it that Clough objected to?
Yeah, I didn't find it shocking when I read it, but when I read Hamilton talking about these particular points, I did remember them. Taylor talks about Clough being insecure. Significantly, he says that Clough was insecure, he lacks self-belief, and he was the only member of his large family to fail the 11 plus. Apparently this was a big issue for Clough. He failed at Leeds. He had big issues relating to the injury and failure at Derby and things like this.
Okay, so the 11 plus never gets a mention in Clough's book.
Never.
He never mentions he failed it. Now, I can understand. I think this was the 11 plus was psychologically damaging for generations of like English boomers, basically. My mum failed her 11 plus, and that was always a sore point with her. Always. And I think she she's never got over the stigma. So that wouldn't shock me.
What is it like? So at 11, you take this big exam, which essentially determines the rest of your academic path. It does seem insane.
Yeah, it's basically, there's two doors and you can go through one or the other, and one is smart and the other is dumb. Like, basically, that's how the British education system was.
My goodness. And so, like, I remember Clough mentioning that he was head boy, but he didn't mention that he was in a kind of a dumb school or anything.
Again, I'm sure there's generations of English people who wouldn't like it to be described as a dumb school, but yeah, there you go. He's he's a head boy at the bad boy school, basically.
Okay. Well, okay. So, but just go back to Hamilton's description of the thing as a marriage, because later the two of them just fall out and they just start niggling at each other over petty things. And ultimately, what they're doing is they're contending with each other for credit for what they achieved together. So your question was, would he have went to Derby? So this is a catalyst for a falling out, and seems to have been a big one. But maybe this would have happened. Maybe there would have been a falling out anyway. But this is the thing that set the whole thing in train. So it really does cast the book in a different light, and it's kind of fun in that respect. Because when I got to the end of it, I was thinking, the book obviously covers a lot of the same ground as Clough's book, and there are interesting things. And Taylor himself is interesting. It's a shame he's talking about players that I've mostly never heard of. But I didn't feel like I came away with a whole new shed load of information about the relationship.
Oh, there is a lot of that, though, isn't it? A lot of forgotten footballers and their signings. And then I signed this fucking no mark for X amount. It's like, oh God, who cares?
For 7,000. Nearly got Kevin Keegan from Scunthorpe for 13,000.
I'll tell you what, I was thinking I couldn't see anything negative in the book, but there was one thing that jumped out at me, which was, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but during his Derby County time, and he says he gets too close to Sam Longson, and Taylor goes, well, Clough should have been shriveling in embarrassment every time Longson referred to him as his adopted son, but he wasn't. And I thought, oh, that is a burn, isn't it? That one is. Now I think about it again. Look, I'm back. You're embarrassing yourself again there, Brian. Look at you. Yeah, now I think about it, that must have stung a bit, right?
Yeah, and you're talking about all of these dictator type characters. The bigger the man, the stronger the man, the thinner the skin. These strong men tend to have very, very thin skin. So you're talking about like an egomaniac who's not going to react well to any criticisms. And some of this does cut to the core. And I think we would have enjoyed the book more had we known that this was really when we read it, that this was what, was responsible for burning the whole thing down.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it weren't this fucking book, Forest could have been one of these empires in European football. We could have gone on winning things.
Like, it seems to me, now that I've immersed myself in all things Clough and Taylor for the last few weeks, that it really was a close run thing for Forest when they got relegated. And I think Taylor would have made the difference. Now, they had been separated for a long time, so they probably would have parted anyway. But had Taylor, whatever kind of series of events, had he stayed there, I think you're right. I think they would have survived that particular relegation. Clough would have maybe walked away after the FA Cup, as we described before, and Nottingham Forest would be the whatever shining city on the hill that it is now in the Premier League anyway.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we are. It's been a wonderful weekend.
And just on that, Nottingham Forest's win at Anfield was the first since
1969, Johnny, long before any Brian Clough or Peter Taylor. They never managed to win at Anfield.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about Taylor. Just one nice line, which I saw in a couple of places, but it's actually in the Hamilton book. Clough referred to himself as the shop window and Peter Taylor as the goods at the back of the shop.
Very glamorous, sort of after all hours, like style 70s description. Like, I don't think anyone would describe themselves as that. It now would be like, he is the Amazon interface, and Peter Taylor is the warehouse where workers are abused.
The front end and the front end and the back end of a website is what you're talking about there.
I'm as soon as I started getting into that analogy, Johnny, I regretted it. I'm not, computer terminology is not my strong point. Or
Okay.
any sort of any of this modern stuff. All right.
Just sorry, can I ask you a question? And it's related to this book, but to life generally. What do you think is the life cycle of a football book? Other than us who bought this book recently, when do you think was the last person someone bought this book?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I was astonished I could get it on Kindle on Amazon, because there's some of these big books we've done and contemporary ones I can't, but I could get this on US Amazon on Kindle. So I don't know. Apparently there is a market for it. I think what I always underestimate is I consider myself a pretty big footy fan, but actually in the terms of it, I'm just a casual supporter on it. There's people who are so into it. I guess there are people that read Peter Taylor's autobiography. How many Forest fans are there? 300,000 or something? Even if 1% has read it, that's 3,000 people.
But 3,000 people for a book that was written 40 years ago, you know?
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Johnny. I can't imagine the last person. I wish you had the data. Who was the last person to buy Peter Taylor's autobiography on US Amazon? It must be a while.
Yeah. And so the thing about this book as well is that he doesn't really tell his story, does he? He tells Clough's story.
No, well, he is, yes, just an accessory to Clough, really, like, and that's how the world sees him. Yeah, so they first meet in Middlesbrough. Taylor's, 6 or 7 years older than him. He's just signed. I just got to get this bit out right. So Peter Taylor talks. He was at Coventry, and they just got a new manager in, Jess Carver. And Jess Carver used to be manager of Roma. I was like, oh, no kidding. Coventry manager, ex-manager of Roma. And he was assisted by a chap called George Rayner, who then went on to take Sweden to the World Cup final in 1958. And I was like, I don't know much about this old football. I didn't realise it's so cosmopolitan. So Peter Taylor starts talking to that move, and then he's like, oh, I'm going to talk to my friend Harry Storer, who was the Derby manager. Now, Harry Storer got his job not from Roma, and he didn't lead Sweden. He was the cricket coach at Butlins. That's what I thought football was in the old days. There it is. That's more like it. Ex-manager at Roma. Oh, I don't know. What about that guy who's coaching cricket at Butlins? He looks like the guy. Anyway, I think that's a nice little insight into football. And the other thing is, when Peter Taylor went to Middlesbrough, he was signed as a goalkeeper as a replacement for Rolando Ugolini. Apparently, I know nothing about Middlesbrough in the 1960s. Old Rolando Ugolini.
Do you think there was a lot of Ugolinis in Middlesbrough at the time?
I don't think there were.
No, I doubt it. Yeah,
he says it. He says he was drawn to Clough because it was a dull place, Middlesbrough in the 1960s, and I do believe you. Apparently, women weren't allowed in boozers and stuff. Like, women were kept out of boozers. Man, it sounds. Oh, I mean, Middlesbrough now is depressing, even when you've got like the internet. Back in there, at least they got Sky. Oh God, it must have been grim.
By the way, and I'm probably going to end up talking too much about the provided you don't kiss me. But he said later in life, especially after Taylor died, Clough wouldn't stop talking about the Middlesbrough days. He was obsessed with it. When they had nothing and they used to just sit around. Apparently, Clough said that you'd be surprised by the amount of footballers who are not interested in football. You know, they'll pop off to the pictures or they'll play snooker or go bird nesting, whatever that thing was. But himself and Taylor were they would go to a greasy spoon and they would move the salt and pepper shakers around and talk about football all the time. And this became, I guess, maybe idealized somewhat in Clough's memory, especially after Taylor passed away and Clough was in the grips of alcoholism.
Well, that's it. I think everyone is obsessed with the old days, aren't they? I mean, just things were better when you were young, right? That's just how it was. Everything you did, it was the first time. It was the most exciting.
You know, obviously we don't need to cover the same ground. So I was just looking for things that were not in Clough's book, ultimately. That's what we want to talk about.
Well, is it Taylor has some films? I've got a couple of quotes here. I mean, Taylor says he awakened Clough's politics, which later became a factor by taking him to watch a young Harold Wilson long before he was Prime Minister, and that awakened the socialist in Cloughy, although Peter Taylor's left-wing leanings died I think apparently with the accumulation of money. But he says about this, and I really think this is important into the understanding of the two. I may have influenced him in that way, as I did in many others, by coming into his life when he was seeking a guiding light. I was 6 years older, married, a father, and experienced in professional football. He was attracted by my faith in him. I was attracted by his unerring ability to put the ball in the net. And I think that's right? He just genuinely believed in him so much, and that must have been very, very appealing to Clough, who at the time was not a huge success on the football pitch.
Yeah, and Clough said that when you're having a tough time and then you hear someone singing a song about you in the distance, you want to know more about that song. You want to meet the singer or something like that. Yeah, so he did believe.
I think it must have been very like, Johnny, when I came into your life, 6 years older, with a lot more life experience, a little bit of know-how, a twinkle in my eye. You like
a goalkeeper,
Johnny?
A failed goalkeeper yourself.
Failed goalkeeper is right. I think I would less like to be remembered for that little stint in goal than anything else in my entire life. God, that was... Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So you are Taylor and I am Clough. Okay, fine. Let's go with that.
No, because there needs to be amendments to that, though, because let's face it, I'm also the shop front, despite being older. Shop front, and you're like some mouldy old packets of noodles in the back. Like, stay there. Get in the back. Anyway, so I think you can draw some parallels between our friendship and theirs. But I want all the positive attributes distributed to me. There's one point just here where I just like to throw it in, just as fun with the old things, where Peter Taylor goes, nowadays players can earn up to £1,000 a week. It's like it never gets old for me, Johnny. It never gets old. He's bemoaning that in 1980. You see what these lads are earning? £1,000 a week. Can you believe it?
So what scale of time do they earn £1,000 in now? Like 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes. Yeah.
So what did you see anything new in the Middlesbrough Hartlepool? He does hate Ernie Ord.
Believe me, I'll check that out. Yeah. No, the one thing again, and this is probably what Clough wouldn't have liked, is after Clough's injury, Taylor attributes him with a quote saying he turned into a berserk man, like just drinking and drinking and drinking. Again, never mentioned by Clough at all, right?
Yeah.
He just said he was a bit low.
But
according to Taylor, he was a man out of control.
Yeah.
And let's face it, Cloughy does not really like touching on his alcoholism at any point, does he? Like, he doesn't. If he does if he ever did touch on it, it was with the very lightest touch. Like, I might have had a couple more drinks.
Yeah, and he says in his own book that he was going to deal with it. It's not such a big deal. I'm going to deal with it now that I'm retired. But we don't really know if he ever did, do we?
Well, I think probably the indications are he did not. I mean, he really did retire from public life. So that was my one thing between the old Hartlepool business. The other thing was, and it's the very start of the book, Clough rings Taylor up, and he's not spoken to him for 6 years. And he's like, I've been offered a job at Hartlepool, but I don't fancy it, but I might do if you come along. But then he slammed the phone down. I'd be like, no. So obnoxious when people do that, just so deeply obnoxious. That would have been enough for me.
But this is what Taylor's getting at when he talks about Clough's insecurity, right? That he needed Taylor to have the confidence to take on the role of Hartlepool's, but then he was never going to be humble enough to, really suck up to him. He just had to he'd ask him and then he'd slam down the phone. So. Yeah,
he didn't really ask him, so he had to call him back and sort of ask him for the job, right? It's terrible. I mean, that would have been enough for me. Like, yeah. You don't want me that much, do you? That you can speak to me with civility on the telephone and give me a cordial greeting and farewell. But yeah, I can see that. And what's more, Taylor recognised that Clough's arrogance is a massive asset in being a striker and being a football manager. He says when he was when he was a footballer at Borough, like he'd push kids out of the way and they say, "Hey, what you doing?" He's like, "Look, I'm better at shooting."
I'm better. Yeah, he said it would be an open goal or whatever.
I'm better at him.
I'm better at.
You remember those kids at school and what the arseholes, but I guess they were the ones who might make it.
And Taylor says that both of them say in their books that during their playing days that they were preparing to be managers. So, the other thing that I was reading this book with an eye for was, what is Taylor's secret sauce? And what were your takeaways in that respect?
Well, he just spots the players, right? That's what he does. He's got an eye for a player, and it's what he talks about. It's not so much tactics, but it's blending the players, making the players work together. He can see attributes in two different footballers that he thinks he can identify that will merge and meld together.
And he's also, because I suppose when he's writing this book, he is also looking at outlining his case for why he's such a big part of the success, because he must have had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. But he does say that he was quick to move players on as well. And that was something that they talk about, that they would make whatever amount of money. They would buy someone really low, he'd be really good, and then they'd see, okay, he's kind of lost, to get him out of there, he's rubbish. And then they'd sell him on before anyone else had kind of seen that particular player had become rubbish. And the other thing that...
Well, isn't that like Fergie, though? Wasn't that exactly what Fergie did? All of a sudden, it's like, what the fuck? Your Amsterdam's out of there. What?
Yeah, the Stam one.
Like.
Yeah. But then, so the other thing was, Taylor was a good man manager himself. And a big part of the falling out was the signing of John Robertson by Taylor later at Derby. But Robertson, in a way, he personifies out the whole Forest, the whole Taylor Clough kind of success, because he was only 22 and he was a fat, lazy mess. And Clough had a real go at him. And apparently they would do a real good cop, bad cop thing or whatever. But Taylor in particular was the one who had identified that Robertson was really good, but that they had to get it out of him. And he told him that he said to this 22-year-old, you're in the gutter professionally and personally. And this is what turned things around for John Robertson as a 22-year-old. And then he was the one who set up Trevor Francis to score the winning goal against Malmo, as you know, the first time they won the European Cup. And then what did he do the following year? He went one better out.
He scored the winner against Hamburg.
Yeah. Actually, I saw a very funny picture of Kenny Burns. So another thing, so you're talking about blending players. It was also Taylor who would see a player and say, that guy, like, so Dave Mackay, but also Kenny Burns. He was a centre forward, and then they moved him to play as a sweeper. They did the same thing, like they moved Mackay as well, right? But there's a funny picture. Kenny Burns on Twitter, and he's in his gear and he's squatting over a ball, like for like a not an action shot, and it's like, look at that mustache, look at those sideburns, look at that left testicle, and there it is.
Yeah, you sent me that picture. I mean, he is an impressive sight, isn't he, Kenny? I mean, it's impressive. You saw him in a dark alley, you'd think maybe I'll walk the other way. Just a big, strappy man with a big mane of blonde hair and a big bollock hanging out of his shorts. Awful.
Yeah, anyway, okay.
But you were talking about Robertson, and you're saying he was, the player. I think the other player, and you just briefly mentioned him, was Dave Mackay, which Clough makes a big deal of it in his autobiography. Yeah. And again, this is what Peter Taylor says was the big moment when they managed to persuade him to come. We touched on that last week, but it did. He tells a quick anecdote that in the late 60s, he was watching Dave Mackay play, and Dave Mackay absolutely smashed a player. And the referee's reaching for his red card, and he says, "Do you know who I am? I'm Dave Mackay. You may take my name, but you will not send me off." And he goes, in the days before red and yellow cards, and I was like, what? When was the yellow card introduced, Johnny?
1967.
1970 World Cup.
Oh,
I had no fucking idea at all. I thought red and yellow cards had always been a thing. It was introduced by Ken Aston, the English referee, and it was first introduced in the 1970 World Cup. Before that, there was no bookings. It was just On or off? I cannot believe I didn't know that.
Wow.
Anyway, so the Derby stuff all checks out. As I say, the Ernie Ord, he moves to Derby.
So again, Ernie Ord being the director of
the
Hartlepool, and he's an evil little bastard. And then they go to Derby. But I suppose there's... Yeah, he is interesting enough on Longson, as you said, that he used to... That Longson kind of, as we kind of knew a little bit reading between the lines from Clough's book, that Longson kind of played Clough a bit. And there was a thing in the Provided You Don't Kiss Me book that Taylor had a joke that the team at Derby was so good that Longson could manage it, but the joke kind of backfired because then Longson just kind of started to believe that, Longson being the director.
I just feel I have a degree of sympathy for Sam Longson. I mean, he didn't know he was going to get this. There's one point, and they say, where the rift is widening, and Taylor goes, and they just go and buy players willy-nilly, right? They just like bring a player into a room, and then they invite the chairman in. It's like, oh, hello, I've never met you before. It's like, well, no, you haven't. You're signing him for 70 grand.
Yeah.
It just seems astonishing to me. And there's one bit where... Sam Longson, Peter Taylor buys a player from non-league, £14,000. Sam Longson, £14,000 is a lot of money for a player from non-league. Go to hell. Just like, fucking hell, lad. I mean, it is his money, isn't it? Like, that's quite a lot of money for a non-league player. Go to hell. It just does seem just totally untenable. I mean, they have absolutely zero respect for anyone.
Yeah, well, Taylor said that Longson was a hard-nosed haulage millionaire, and Clough was brought in by him, and it's kind of like he was naive to believe that this tough businessman was like some kind of grandfather figure for him.
This is the staff at Derby after the first season. I think the casualties at the end of our first season totaled 16 players, 4 groundsmen, some caterers, a couple of clerks, and a tea lady who laughed after a bad defeat. Fucking Mourinho and Eva Carneiro, eat your fucking heart out. Like, tea ladies, they weren't even safe. Like, get out. Can you imagine? Oh, I'd love to have seen that happen. I mean, what was it? Did they sack her on the spot? Or did they talk about it and say, hey, do you see her smirking away after we lost? She's for the cutting block. I really quite enjoyed that.
Can you, because I can't do it, I was trying in my own time. Can you just do Clough saying shithead?
Shithead.
So apparently he called everyone shithead. So Hamilton says in his book that he wrote some critical article and he got a call from Clough banning him from the ground, never come back. And then Hamilton was like, okay, fine. And this was, in the early years. And then he got a call from Clough a couple of days later. It was like, shithead, where are you, shithead? And he's like, well, you banned me from the club for life. And he's like, I didn't mean it, you stupid prick, or whatever. Like all these kind of like so kind of abusive and jocular at the same time. And he said, come down to the ground and we'll have a chat. And that's when Clough essentially said to him, you can report on this club, but essentially you'll do it on my terms. And then forever, he went to all of the games on the bus. He saw everything. And then at the end, like he would be going between Clough and Taylor's offices, and Clough saw him walking down the corridor one day to see Taylor. He's like, shithead, where are you going? Before he could say anything, Clough was like, who am I in this club? And Hamilton is like, you're the manager. And he's like, yeah, remember that. So I'd say he was just always being a prick to people. I'd say he was a tough son of a gun.
Yeah, really difficult to be around, probably. And shithead's a shitty word as well.
Shithead.
Someone's like, all right, wanker. All right, fair enough. All right, shithead. Fuck off. It's different. It's just different. It's an awful thing to say. There's no nice way of saying shithead, is there? Well, I was going to mention, how did they finally force them out of Derby County? What was the final straw, the lasting dignity? They stopped restocking the drinks cabinet.
Probably not the first time they did that at Derby as well. They did it to a previous manager.
I mean, when it's coming when they're not stocking your drinks cabinet anymore. It really was like Mad Men back in them days, wasn't it? Like, where the fuck is my bottle of Bells? Like, this is the final straw. I'm not taking this anymore.
Yeah, so they go to Brighton, and I did think it was interesting here because Taylor says the Clough was just not interested. They were down in the 3rd division. Clough's mind was in Derby. I guess he was licking his wounds, and his ambitions were way higher up the leagues. And
Clough, that's right. And he's had, that's the thing. When he was at Derby, he's saying he was getting job offers from Aston Villa and, more interestingly, Ajax.
Yeah, and later on, Barcelona.
What a story that would have been, eh?
And
I'm glad it didn't happen, but blimey, imagine a Clough at Ajax or Barcelona.
And it was the year that they were signing Maradona. As in, Maradona had signed the contract but hadn't arrived, and they were like, would you like the job? And they had just renewed their contract at Forest.
Right then, Johnny, we're going to write a script, aren't we? We're going to write a script, an alternative universe where, mate, in the late 70s, like Clough and Maradona together.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I think
that's a shame, isn't it?
Clough would have suited Maradona.
Yeah, Clough would have given him whatever he needed, wouldn't it? That's the thing. He would have given him whatever it took to just get him to play.
Yeah, exactly. But in Brighton, Clough went off to see Ali Fraser, as in Muhammad Ali, and Joe Fraser. Then he went off on a cricket tour. And then he went to Iran to negotiate going to the national team, approached by Ajax, as you said. And he even went canvassing for elections. So he just wasn't interested in Brighton whatsoever at this point.
Yeah, just not at all. But even when he was interested in teams, it didn't necessarily mean he was going to turn up. I'm jumping ahead here, but when he went to Leeds United, the first training session, he was still on holiday and all the players were there going, where's the new manager? He's not back yet.
Yeah.
That's just ill-advised, isn't it? There's cocky arrogance, and there's just this is just going to rub people the wrong way.
But he wanted to rub people the wrong way, didn't he? That was pointed. I am the boss.
Yeah, very much so. But
this is what Putin apparently does. Putin, you can look online. There's like a list of how long he kept various heads of state waiting in meetings. So, he was always a real asshole to Merkel. Merkel's afraid of dogs, and Putin is a German speaker, and he would bring along a massive dog to scare Merkel. But he had Merkel waiting for an hour. But the Queen was only 3 minutes. You'll be pleased to hear.
Yes, I suppose I am. a big Queen man. I am, Johnny.
But yeah, that's just that's just the alpha thing, isn't it? But what I thought was interesting as well is he talked about. He says that he was not tight with money. Taylor was always splashing the cash around, but it was Clough. And when you talked about Collymore and the non-signing of Collymore by Clough, I think Taylor would have just said, yeah, go for him. And at this point, Clough had, I'm really jumping ahead here, but it just came up at this point because I can't remember what it was specific, but he was talking about how much he was splashing the money around a lot more than Clough ever would.
Well, that's right. There's a whole paragraph about it, how he was always happy to throw in an extra 50 grand here and a 50 grand there. And you would be, right, if it's not your money.
Yeah, why not?
Sure. Why the fuck not?
Why not?
I remember that talking in the season. Earlier in the season, I was WhatsApping my friend, and it was about Eddie Nketiah, and he's like, he's not worth 30 million, though, is he? Oh, we're going to buy him for 30 million. It's not our fucking money, is it? We're just going to see. We'll have an extra player. Forget about the money. We don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's all kind of silly money anyway, isn't it? It's like monopoly money.
Well, that's right. Going back to the Ali and Fraser there's a bit where I think Peter Taylor's a bit dim-witted because Muhammad Ali goes, you wouldn't be big enough for football in my country. And from that, Peter Taylor thinks he's never heard of soccer ever. And I just thought, you dummy, you didn't mean that, you dummy. Just leave that out of the book. All right, so this is their first divide, right? So Taylor stays at Brighton.
Stabs Clough in the back.
Goes off for his ill-fated 44 days in... Peter Taylor stabbed Clough in the back by remaining where he is in the job that he was made to take by Brian Clough. While Brian Clough sets off on an ill-fated mission. Oh, you stabbed me in the back.
I carried out a controlled environment. No, sorry. I carried out an experiment in a controlled environment. I watched the Clough Revy interview, all 26 minutes, with Jenny, my wife, who knew nothing about, obviously, the kind of subsequent developments with these men and what happened in their careers. And
she still gets good jobs. I don't know how it works.
How she didn't know about Don Revy leaving the England job to be the manager of Saudi Arabia, I will never know.
What do they teach you in Irish schools, Johnny? What do you learn in history? Come on.
Well, it's in the 11 plus, I'm sure. But she was pro Revy. She was Revy all the way.
Well, I've had a private conversation about that. What she was pro Revy. What did she not like about Cloughie? Doesn't she like charisma, Johnny? Well, obviously not. She married you. Yeah, all right. So you're Don Revy and I'm Brian Clough in this situation. I'll take that. Lovely stuff.
Yeah.
Go chase your oil money, Johnny. Go on.
Yeah. He didn't say all that much about the lead stuff. He could have put the boot in there, I suppose, and said that things would have turned out differently had he went. But we know
again,
that
this gives us all perspective, though, because he's not going to put the boot in, is he? Because he's got to work alongside this man who at some point is going to read this book. He's quietly writing this book.
He's in now,
knowing that his best friend and work partner is going to read it at some point. So, yeah, of course he can't. There's going to be very little candid.
Yeah, that's fair enough. He's typing there quietly away, tick 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 tick, and Clough is down the hall in the next room or whatever.
I tell you what, I am jealous. Every time they talk about flying off to where do they go? Mallorca.
Mallorca.
Must have been lovely to go to Mallorca in the 1970s, mustn't it? Must have been absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, it probably was very nice. And they did go all the time.
All the time. Wouldn't live abroad because that would be fucking evil, wouldn't it, Brian? You can go on holiday all the time and still come back and drink the water. That's all right.
It kind of reveals itself slowly as they're talking about Forest. He says certain things that made it evident that, wait a minute, when he's writing this book, he's still at Forest. And I was like, oh my God, we're not going to get the whole thing that I
yeah, that's one of the
about.
notes. I think it's about Archie Gemmill or something. It's like, and he's still playing with us now. It might have been John McGovern, and he's still playing with us now. It's like, what? When was it written? Yeah, I had a moment like that. What?
Yeah. He was saying at Forest, and it was fun. The Forest stuff is fun. And he's saying that they would essentially, and it's to the point you made earlier, they would try and trick the chairman, Stuart Drayton, into some of the signings. Like they kind of bring him in at the very last minute and not really tell him anything.
I think Stuart Dryden was just a board member. I don't think he was the chairman.
Okay.
He was the guy that got done for the post office in Ruddington, right? The fraud. He was their one ally on the board.
Yeah, he went to jail.
Yeah.
And he took a bit of money off Clough on the way, didn't he?
The Clough doesn't know what he gets. He's such a nice man, apart from being a low-level crook.
Yeah, he puts it in his book. So there was one of the, I guess, big Taylor successes, and I guess this is also... So Gary Birtles went on to play for Manchester United, and it was a big failure. He signed around the same time as Robson, if I recall correctly, maybe even the same day. But he was a big failure. But Taylor found him playing in the non-leagues for a team called Long Eaton, and everyone said he was shit. And Taylor went to see him, and he was like, yeah, this guy's not great. And then he saw one flash, said, actually, this guy will be good. He just did one thing, and Taylor was
he
like,
just moved the ball, didn't he? Just moved the ball once in a way that he liked. And that was...
Yeah, and then he scored. He went on to score an assist against Liverpool in the European Cup when they knocked them out. And it was scored like more than 20 goals a year. Like that is, what a skill. What an eye this man must have had.
Yeah, he cast his bread out on the water and it came back buttered, as he says at one point in a
That's
very
nice.
confusing statement.
It's nice though. Lovely ducks buttering bread and sending it back.
Is that what you do? It's like, I'm just going to cast the old bread out on the water, hope it comes back with some butter on. It did. Yeah, very nice.
One thing that was very enjoyable, because Taylor took it so personally, is when they were overlooked for the England job in favour of Ron Greenwood. I enjoyed that stuff a lot.
Yeah, well, there's huge resentment there.
Yeah.
And old Dick Rag just didn't realise that Brian Clough would completely change his personality.
Yeah, he tries to sound diplomatic, but then he just kind of is really blunt, and he kind of says that Ron Greenwood never won anything. His team was his England team was terrible, and then he just kind of goes on like attacks on various England players of the time. Steve Coppell was decent but limited. Ray Wilkinson was negative, never moves the ball forward and never scores. It's like, yeah, these are the players I do know, so give me more of that,
And these are the contemporary players as well. I mean, these are players
they were playing at the time.
Taylor, exactly.
Yeah. He says that he would have played Hoddle and Trevor Francis.
But Hoddle was the great forgotten man. Hoddle should have won 150 caps, all that business.
Yeah.
I tell you what, who does have a big role to play, as ever, in almost half of our autobiographies. Old Thermos head himself, Shilton. He's in there, isn't he? Shilton was fucking coining it in, wasn't he, in the old days?
He was on
£100 a week, mate, that fucker, like. He was on 400 quid a week, but he can't get his head round it, like how much Peter Shilton earned.
And also, I enjoyed this because it came up in the Fowler book. Phil Thompson was rubbish.
His big fucking nose.
Yeah. He shouldn't have been playing for England at all like that.
Yeah, this is it. There is a lot of that, and unfortunately, all of these players are just all before our time, aren't they? I mean, I couldn't tell you how good Steve Coppell was. I know that Glenn Hoddle was meant to be great, but can I tell you a great Glenn Hoddle moment? No, I cannot.
I know that he liked to read the Bible on the bus. We learned that. We learned that from the Wenger book. Do I have this right that Clough wasn't an immediate success at Forest? It was only when Taylor arrived, and he arrived later, that things restarted.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, his first season, they finished, 8th bottom or something? Not
of the second division
at all. Yeah,
the second division. And then Taylor comes. So this is, this is the reason that we're interested in this. Books ultimately is to try and, get some sense of what it was. But it's, when Taylor wasn't there, Clough didn't succeed. And that became a problem for him later in life. He became very paranoid about the fact that he didn't have a lot of success without Taylor.
Yeah, no, he really was the secret sauce, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And even as a Forest fan, I didn't realise the season they did get promoted to the first division. They only finished 3rd. It was one of those, they're already off on holiday, they're relying on a result from somewhere else, which seemed to happen a lot at Forest.
Yeah, they got a good bit of that, didn't they? Yeah.
It seems a very unsatisfying way of doing things.
They were off walking around Rutland Lake. Is that the lake that I walked around with you once upon a time?
You cycled around it, Johnny. Yes, you did. Okay. It's called Rutland Water. Just get it right. That really annoyed me.
Oh, really? It was wrong.
Rutland Water. Biggest man-made reservoir in Western Europe.
Well, another quiz thing, if it ever comes up. Biggest man-made reservoir in all of... If you were the quiz master and that question, if I wrote Rutland Lake instead of Rutland Water, would you give me the point?
No, I would not. No, because I had to look it up. I had to double check. There wasn't some sort of Rutland Lake, but I didn't know what it was. But there is no Rutland Lake. It's Rutland Water.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, is it? What stretch of water stretches between Europe and America? The Atlantic Pond. Wrong. It's not a pond. It's an ocean. And it's not a lake. It's a fucking reservoir and a water.
A water. Actually, on that topic, and I had a question very specific to you. I have a tendency sometimes to say water and wham, because you have a story about hearing, I think it's maybe Steve Stone saying that on the bench at a Forest game. This water is wham. Yeah?
He was at training. And he said it to Mark Crossley. Yeah, as he was walking off the pitch. It was the same day that my brother ran over to Erling Brown Haaland's dad, Alfie Haaland, to get his autograph, and Alfie Haaland told my brother to fuck off, I'm still training. And my brother ran back crying. Yes, what as wham. Yeah, Steve Snow said it to Mark Crossley, and I've said it forevermore.
The reason I ask is there is one of the chapters in the Provided You Don't Kiss Me is called What a Wast. W-A-S-T. W-A-S-T. And like there's a quote from Clough saying, what a waste, what a waste. But the chapter is called What a Wast. So is there something going on in Nottingham about this pronunciation?
Well, Steve Stone's a Geordie and Cloughie's from the northeast as well, so maybe it's a northeast thing.
Okay, well, there you go.
Very quickly, there's the £1 million signing of Trevor Francis. This is a big thing. I did think it was kind of fun that there was a transfer tug of war for the most expensive player in English history between like Forest and Birmingham, not very glamorous. And the previous record was 516,000, where there was a transfer tug of war between Middlesbrough and West Brom. What was going on with the big teams back then? What were they doing? It was just different, eh? Finances were different.
That occurred to me as well. Like even players that they were selling and buying, they never seemed to go to Liverpool or Arsenal or whatever.
It just always strikes me, all these big transfers. Yeah, there was Brian Robson was a big transfer, wasn't he? He was a big one, but yeah, just that was something. And the other thing was when Forest spent £1 million, which is the equivalent of about 20 million, but the most money ever spent in English football. 2 months a year, Trevor Francis fucked off to Detroit to play football in the North American Soccer League.
And got injured.
What the fuck? I mean, that would be number one, right? Do you play for another team in the close season? Yes, I do. Are you going to stop doing that? No, I'm not. Is there a chance you'll get injured? Yes, there is. I don't think I'll be spending £1 million. I mean, I knew that happened, but surely they just say, no, you can't do that. Or was the money offered in America so great that the British teams couldn't deny it? It must have been, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
That is crazy.
Wow. I didn't know that. I never knew that. They bought £1 million and he was signed for 2 teams. Nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy.
A lot of the Forest years is just like, I signed this no mark for 16 grand and then sold him to some fucking inconsequential team for 40 grand, and aren't I great? Yeah, there's a lot of players that I didn't know of, just a lot.
I wanted to read the last paragraph of the book because it's essentially, I hope we part on a high note and on the friendliest terms. It's what he says at the end of this book. That was not the ending I expected.
As I say, I mean, this was, because I was reading it on the Kindle, it was so abrupt, the end. And then the end was so, I mean, genuinely tragic, right? Tragic's like, oh yeah, I hope we're friends forever. I love this guy. Like, turns out 2 years from now, you won't speak to him ever again until you die. So
he ends the book like Clough caught him in the act of writing it.
Yeah, very. He just can't write anymore now. Like Brian's just walked into the laundry room, caught him tapping away on his typewriter.
Yeah. I keep going on about it, but the other book, Provided You Don't Kiss Me, it says that Taylor had had a heart attack when they were at Derby. But Clough had one when they were at Forest, which you presumably know. And Taylor took over as the capo de tutti capi or whatever, the head honcho. And he had a total breakdown, Taylor. And he became crazy kind of paranoid and was kind of wouldn't speak to people on the phone and was going around his office looking for bugs and saying that he kept hearing things that he had said in private. He kept reading it in print, written by people who couldn't have been there. So he thought he was being bugged. So he went a bit mad, and this is when so this is post-book. The book finishes, they're still at Forest, but this happens and then and then Clough comes back and they really, really start to hate each other. And Taylor resigns from Forest because he's too stressed out. And then Clough says to your man Hamilton, and he was back 186 days later. Like the fact that he knew to the day the amount of days that Taylor had resigned. And there was a reason that Clough was so pissed off is that Clough negotiated Taylor's severance from Forest and helped him keep some car or whatever. And then he was back down the road at Derby for that whole debacle then. And Taylor didn't succeed at Derby. He brought Derby down. He resigned before they were relegated, but he resigned a few games before they went down. So yeah, it's, you said it's tragic, but the whole thing just kind of blew up. And then after Taylor went, of course, we know Clough kind of totally imploded as well and became kind of a sclerotic alcoholic.
But, I can't stress enough, Clough had another good 7 years. So he had genuinely a good 7 years. Another
fair enough.
championship.
But did he win anything?
No, he won the League Cup twice. And we regularly finished in the top six in the first division in the late 80s. We genuinely were good. I mean, that's the team that I was on board with. There was 5 Forest players in the England team when I started supporting Forest.
Apparently when Taylor got Derby resigned, Clough brought your man Hamilton into his office to toast it with double whiskies all around. So yeah, those guys really ended up hating each other.
Yeah, so it is. It's a funny book, this, isn't it? Because it's so incomplete. Yeah. It really is just a snapshot of a time. And it's really sad that Peter Taylor doesn't realise his life's going to get a lot worse. Oh, man. Both their lives are going to get a lot worse pretty much from the moment that book was written.
Yeah, and that's what's significant about the book, I suppose, ultimately. Clough's line was, Taylor, if he wanted to write a book, he should have written a book about coaching or picking players, something that he used to be good at. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Taylor died of, I wrote it down,
pulmonary lung disease. Yeah, his daughter writes about it. It's a cruel disease with no cure and no cause. He did smoke his whole life. I suspect that might have been part of the cause.
It might have contributed. And the book all proceeds of the book went to this charity on this particular issue. But yeah, so he died suddenly at the age of 62, but he had been diagnosed with this, right?
Yes.
So it's not like Clough could say he didn't, Clough would have known that he was ill.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, and then, like I said, if you weren't a Forest fan and have already read these 2 books, you probably would have no interest in Provided You Don't Kiss Me. But because you are a Forest fan, I think you should read it because it does shed a lot of light on these other kind of areas. And essentially, those bits after Taylor and Clough just kind of talking about Taylor all of the time. And he went from being this, evil bastard in his eyes to this saintly figure. And I suppose that goes back to this idea of this kind of marriage. And obviously that happens in marriages as well when someone passes away, that they kind of become lionized a bit maybe in the eyes of the other person. They forget all of the failings. That's
my feeling. He says, I should have forgiven him before he died, but I don't think he had the capability to forgive him until he was dead, if you see what I mean.
I absolutely. I think so. I think that's absolutely the case.
Yeah, proud man, a proud and stupid, toxic old man.
Yeah, well, I liked living in the head of Clough and Taylor for the last few weeks.
But I should also suggest you watch a film, I Believe in Miracles, which is on Netflix, which is a 90-minute movie about Forest European Cup winning team, and it's really great. It's released about 5 years ago.
Okay.
It's fabulous. Real taste of a time. You got to see swinging Nottingham in the 70s. Looks great.
And is swinging Nottingham any better than swinging Middlesbrough was in Nottingham?
Right, you're lucky you're in France. Fucking of course it is. Nottingham, one of the best cities going. Yeah. Party town. How dare you?
Okay. Well, I don't know.
Well, I'm telling you now, Johnny, that Nottingham is a lot better than Middlesbrough.
Okay.
I've never been to Middlesbrough, but I suspect it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. So, what did you think of this book?
Well, it was a very enlightening accompaniment to what we read just last week, but it did feel very, very incomplete. It really is a snapshot, and of course, it just doesn't tell the full story. And I think it's also held back by the fact, and which I've since learned, that he can't really tell the Cloughy stories because He's going to read them. So
He's going to be
there's
cross.
a lot we don't know about it. There's a lot we don't know, right? We learned a little bit, but there's a lot we didn't learn. I give it 3 out of 5. Three obnoxious chairmen.
3 obnoxious chairmen out of 5. Yeah, I might give it 3.5. Yeah, I'll give it 3.5. I did enjoy it. But if I was to read anything about Clough, it would be the one that we didn't do an episode on. Provided you don't kiss me.
That's what you recommend, eh? It did take you back though, and I tell you what, Johnny, I could smell the Farrah slacks like through the book. You could his nylon shirt and his cigarettes. I mean, you are there back in the 70s with all the accompanying outdated modes of thought.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was an interesting insight.
Yeah, like you said, there are 300,000 Forest fans. There probably is a constituent of that group that would be interested in this, but it's probably quite a small one, isn't it?
Well, what's more, I mean, they'd be really old now as well. Really, really old. I mean, Taylor was before my time, and I'm no kid.
Yeah.
To actually remember Peter Taylor being at Forest, you'd be in your 70s by now.
So he died in 1992. No?
1990.
He died in 1990. Yeah.
Next episode is Garincha.
And this is not an autobiography because I guess it's kind of before those times.
I'm going to have a guess, but Garincha couldn't read or write.
So this is Garincha, The Triumph and Tragedy of Brazil's Forgotten Footballing Hero by Ru Castro. Available on Kindle. Are you on the index? Okay.
All right. Yeah, so I'm headbutting the microphone, so it's probably a good time to say goodbye. Well, thanks again for joining us here on the Adamola Bookman pod.
Yeah, thank you very much, Al. Thanks to Dara Finnan for the music. And yeah, catch us on, I nearly said Spotify. We're on Spotify, but yeah, Instagram. If you've got any comments, any recommendations, any criticisms, we welcome them.
I echo those thoughts. Apart from criticisms. Yes, compliments, please. All right.
That's why you're the Clough of this pair.
That's right, young man.
Shithead. All right. Cheers, buddy.